The Galactic Diplomatic Station was busy as always. Aliens from dozens of worlds walked through the long metal hallways. Their voices mixed together in strange languages that Kyle Harper was still learning to recognize. He had been working here for 3 months now as a military officer from Earth. The job was simple enough. He helped with meetings between different alien species and made sure humans were represented in galactic discussions. Kyle thought he had seen everything the galaxy could offer. Big aliens, small aliens, friendly ones, and scary ones. Some looked like animals from Earth, while others looked like nothing he could have imagined. But today was going to be different. Today he would learn that sometimes the smallest actions could have the biggest results. A tall alien approached him in the main common area. She had dark blue scales that shimmered under the station lights. Her eyes were golden and watched everything with sharp attention. This was Ambassador Thesara from the Vrexian species. The Vrexians were known across the galaxy as one of the most dangerous predator races. They hunted on their home world and brought that hunting instinct with them to the stars. Kyle stood up straight and tried not to show his nervousness. Thesara was at least 7 feet tall and her teeth were clearly visible when she spoke. But she had always been polite to him during their previous meetings. "Lieutenant Harper," she said in her voice that sounded like music mixed with hissing, "I have a question for you. It may seem strange, but I hope you will consider it." "Of course, Ambassador. What can I do for you?" "We have a nursery on this station. It holds young children from 7 different predator species. They are learning about the galaxy and meeting beings from other worlds. They have never seen a human before. Would you be willing to visit them?" Kyle had not expected that request. "You want me to meet predator children?" "Yes, they are young and curious. It would be good for them to learn about your species. Humans are new to galactic society. The younglings should understand that the galaxy has many kinds of intelligent life." Kyle thought about it for only a moment. It seemed like an easy task and might even be interesting. "Sure, I can do that. When do you want me to come?" "Right now, if you have time. The younglings are in their social learning period. It is the best time to introduce new experiences." They walked together through the eastern section of the station. Kyle had never been to this area before. The walls were marked with symbols he did not recognize, and the air felt warmer here. They passed through several security doors that opened automatically for Thesara. The nursery was huge. The room was divided into different sections with various climbing structures, water features, and resting areas. The ceiling was high and painted to look like a sky. Young aliens of many shapes and sizes played together under the watch of adult caretakers. "These are the predator young," Thesara explained as they stopped near a large enclosed space. "We have Vrexian, Karthak, Silthan, Morgathi, Queller, Havrin, and Teskari children here. All of these species evolved as hunters on their homeworlds." Kyle looked through the clear barrier and saw about 30 young creatures. Some were as small as cats, while others were already the size of large dogs. They all moved with a grace that seemed natural. Even the youngest ones had sharp claws or teeth. Their eyes were alert and focused. These were baby predators, and it showed in every movement they made. "They are beautiful," Kyle said honestly. Despite knowing how dangerous these species could be as adults, he could not help but find the younglings fascinating. "Come inside. I will introduce you properly." Thesara opened a door in the barrier and gestured for Kyle to follow. As soon as he stepped inside, everything stopped. The younglings quit playing and turned to look at the strange new creature entering their space. 30 pairs of predator eyes locked onto Kyle Harper. He felt his heart beat faster. His instincts told him to be careful, but his mind reminded him these were just children. Kyle raised one hand in a peaceful gesture. "Hello, everyone. My name is Kyle. I am a human." The younglings made various sounds. Some chirped, others growled softly, and a few clicked their tongues or beaks. They tilted their heads and watched him with intense curiosity. None of them moved closer, but none of them ran away either. They were studying him just as he was studying them. Then Kyle felt it. That familiar tickle in his nose. He had been fighting a cold for 2 days, and the station's recycled air was not helping. He tried to hold it back. This was definitely not the right moment, but his body had other plans. He turned his head away quickly and covered his face. Achoo. The sneeze echoed through the nursery like a loud bang. Kyle fumbled in his pocket for a tissue while apologizing. "Sorry about that. I have been a bit sick." When he looked up, he froze completely. Every single youngling was staring at him with wide eyes. Their bodies were perfectly still. Even the most active ones had stopped moving. The entire nursery was silent in a way that felt almost unnatural. Then something unexpected happened. A small Vrexian cub took one step forward. Its scales were lighter than Thessara's and still had the softness of youth. The cub opened its mouth and made a sound that was surprisingly similar to what Kyle had just done. Achoo! Kyle blinked in surprise. Did that cub just imitate his sneeze? Before he could process what was happening, another cub made the same sound. Then another. Within seconds, every youngling in the nursery was sneezing or trying to sneeze. They bounced around making achoo sounds in various pitches and volumes. Some sounded close to the real thing, while others were clearly struggling to get it right. But they were all trying. Achoo! 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 The noise was incredible. The caretakers looked confused and concerned. Thessara's golden eyes went wide with what Kyle thought might be shock. The younglings ran around the nursery, treating the sneeze sound like the most exciting game they had ever discovered. Karthak cub that looked like a small bear with crystal-like spines ran straight up to Kyle. It sneezed right at him, and then wagged its tail so hard its whole back end moved. Achoo! Achoo! Kyle laughed because he did not know what else to do. Ambassador, what is happening? Thessara watched the chaos with a mix of fascination and worry. I am not entirely certain. Young predators often copy sounds that they think show strength or dominance. It is part of how they learn their place in social groups, but I have never seen all species respond the same way to one sound before. A bird-like Morgathi cub with shiny feathers jumped onto Kyle's shoulder. It sneezed directly into his ear with enthusiasm. Kyle gently lifted the youngling off his shoulder, but 3 more cubs crowded around his feet. They all sneezed at him repeatedly. They think my sneeze is some kind of challenge call? Kyle asked while trying not to step on any small tails or paws. It appears that way. To them it might sound like a battle cry or a declaration of power. They want to show you they can make the same sound. Kyle had come to the nursery expecting to shake some hands or claws and maybe answer a few questions about Earth. Instead, he had accidentally started a sneezing competition among baby predators from across the galaxy. The situation was completely ridiculous, but also somehow wonderful. For the next hour, the younglings continued their sneezing game. They incorporated it into their play fighting. One would charge another, sneeze loudly, and the other would sneeze back before they tumbled away wrestling. The sound of achoo filled the nursery constantly. The caretakers tried to calm things down, but the younglings were too excited. Eventually, Thessara decided to let them continue. This is a learning experience, she said. We should document everything. The Science Council will want to study this. Kyle found himself surrounded by younglings demanding his attention. They wanted him to sneeze again and again. Each time he did, they would erupt in fresh excitement. He noticed something interesting developing. The cubs that could sneeze the loudest were getting more attention from the others. The sneeze was becoming important in their social structure. Ambassador, Kyle said while a Teskari cub climbed onto his leg. I think we might have created something bigger than we realized. Thessara nodded slowly. Her expression was hard to read, but Kyle sensed she was both concerned and impressed. Yes, Lieutenant. The question now is what we should do about it. That question would turn out to be more complicated than either of them could imagine. By evening, the news had spread beyond the nursery. Adult members of the predator species heard about the human with the strange battle cry who had captivated their young. They wanted to meet Kyle Harper for themselves. Kyle had come to the nursery for a simple visit. He was leaving as possibly the most interesting human in the entire galaxy to the most dangerous predator species known to exist. And it all started because he could not hold back a sneeze. As he walked out of the nursery that day, he could still hear the younglings behind him. They were settling down for rest time, but even as they got quiet, occasional soft achoos could be heard. They had adopted his sneeze as part of their communication. Kyle shook his head and smiled. The galaxy was strange and wonderful, and he had just made it a little bit stranger. The news traveled fast through the predator communities on the station. By the next morning, Kyle woke up to find a message waiting for him. Ambassador Thessara requested his presence in her office immediately. The message said it was important. Kyle got dressed quickly and made his way through the station. He wondered what could be so urgent. Maybe the younglings had caused problems after he left. Maybe their parents were angry about the sneezing game. His mind came up with a dozen possibilities as he walked. When he arrived at Thessara's office, he stopped at the door. Through the window, he could see several large aliens inside. These were not the cute younglings from yesterday. These were fully grown predator species and they looked serious. Kyle took a breath and entered. Tessara stood near her desk and gestured for him to come forward. "Lieutenant Harper, thank you for coming quickly. These beings have asked to meet you." Kyle looked around the room. There were 6 different aliens present and each one was clearly a warrior. They stood with confidence and their eyes watched him with the same sharp focus he had seen in the younglings. But these adults were much more intimidating. A massive Karthak stood up first. He was easily 9 feet tall with crystal spines that caught the light. His claws looked like they could cut through metal. "I am Commander Vrock. My son was in the nursery yesterday. He has not stopped making your sound since he came home. I want to understand what happened." Kyle swallowed hard. "Commander, I honestly just sneezed. I have a cold and it happened without me planning it." "Show us this sneeze," said a Morgothi warrior. Her feathers were battle-scarred and her beak looked sharp enough to pierce armor. This was awkward. Kyle cleared his throat. "It is not really something I can do on command. It just happens when my nose is irritated." "Try," Commander Vrock said. It was not a request. Kyle did his best to produce a fake sneeze. "Achoo?" The room went quiet. The predators stared at him. Kyle felt sweat forming on his forehead. Then Vrock began laughing. The sound was deep and loud enough to shake the walls. "This small sound has our younglings fighting for dominance?" Vrock laughed harder. "I expected something more impressive." A Vrexian officer named Kess stepped forward. "The size of the sound does not matter, Commander. What matters is the reaction it caused. Every youngling responded the same way regardless of species. That has never happened before." "Why do you think that is human?" asked a Silthan admiral. Her species was aquatic and she wore a special suit filled with water. She spoke through a translator device. Kyle had thought about this question all night. "I think it might be because the sneeze is sudden and loud compared to normal talking. It might trigger some instinct related to alarm calls or surprise sounds that baby predators recognize across species." "You are saying it reaches something basic in their brains?" Vrock said thoughtfully. "Yes, sir. Something that goes deeper than learned behavior. The younglings do not understand it, but they recognize it as important somehow." A Queller representative made clicking sounds with its mouth parts. The translator converted it to words. "This could be useful. Our young often have trouble socializing with other species. If this sound creates instant connection, we could use it in our programs." "I would be careful," Tessera warned. "We do not understand all the effects yet." Lieutenant Harper became like a pack leader to those younglings through accident. "Using this deliberately might have consequences we cannot predict." "Or," said Kess with interest in his voice, "it could change how we approach working together. Think about it. If we can find similar triggers that work across species, we could improve cooperation throughout the galaxy." Kyle felt uncomfortable being talked about like he was an experiment. "With respect, we are discussing children here. Maybe we should focus on understanding what happened before we try to use it for other purposes." "Use it?" Brock's spines rattled. "You misunderstand, human. We do not want to make weapons from this. We want unity. Predator species have always competed with each other. We fight over territory and dominance. But our young responded to you as one group. Do you understand how rare that is?" Kyle was starting to see the bigger picture. "You think I accidentally showed them how to work together across species lines?" "Exactly," the Silthan admiral said. "Those younglings trust you now. They follow your example. When they grow up, they will remember what you taught them about cooperation. But I am not a teacher. I am a military officer." "All warriors are teachers," Vrock stated firmly. "We teach by how we act and what we show others. You will go back to the nursery. You will continue working with the younglings, and you will show them that strength comes in many forms." It was not really a request. Kyle looked at Tessera hoping she would help. She tilted her head slightly. "The council has decided, Lieutenant Harper. I will supervise everything, of course. But you must understand what you have started here. You touched something deep in how predators think. Walking away now would be seen as weakness or refusing a challenge. And if I stay, then you become part of something new, a bridge between humans and the oldest warrior cultures in the galaxy." Kyle thought about the younglings he had met yesterday, their excited faces when they copied his sneeze, the pure joy they showed while playing. Then he looked at the adult predators in the room. They could easily hurt him, but they were asking for his help instead. "Okay," he said finally, "I will do it. But I have one condition. We document everything properly." If this is going to be a cultural exchange, it needs to be done right. No hidden plans or secret goals. We learn from each other honestly. Brock extended a huge clawed hand. Agreed, human. You have courage. That is the first lesson our young will learn from you. Kyle shook the hand carefully. The other officers made their own gestures of acceptance in their species' traditional ways. Some bowed, others touched their foreheads, and one clicked its mandibles in a pattern that meant respect. After the meeting ended and the officers left, Thessera approached Kyle quietly. You handled that well. Many beings would have been too scared to negotiate with them. I was terrified, Kyle admitted. Yes, but you did not show it. That is also a skill that warriors value. She paused. The younglings will be expecting you this afternoon. I suggest you prepare yourself. They heard about your meeting with the council. They will be very excited. Great, what have I gotten myself into? History, Lieutenant Harper. You have gotten yourself into history. That afternoon, Kyle returned to the nursery. What he saw made him stop at the entrance. All the younglings had lined up in neat rows. They stood at attention like tiny soldiers. When they saw him, they all sneezed together. Achoo! It was the strangest greeting Kyle had ever received. But as the younglings broke formation and ran toward him with excitement on their faces, he found himself smiling. Maybe this would not be so bad after all. Maybe a simple sneeze really could change things. The next few weeks established a routine. Kyle visited the nursery every day. He played with the younglings and taught them games. He noticed they were learning fast. Not just learning the games, but learning how to work together. He started adding structure to their play. When they climbed, he encouraged them to help each other reach the top. When they played hunting games, he taught them to communicate their plans. He even introduced basic problem solving by hiding treats around the enclosure and making them work together to find everything. The younglings responded well. They began organizing themselves without being told. The Vrexian cubs would help the smaller Morgathi cubs reach high places. The strong Karthak cubs would let others ride on their backs. They were becoming a real team. Thessera documented everything. She took notes and recorded videos. This is remarkable, she said one day, while watching the younglings share food equally among themselves. Predator young normally compete for resources. These are actively cooperating. They are learning that working together gets better results, Kyle explained. It is not complicated. Just basic teamwork. Basic for humans, perhaps. Revolutionary for predator species. Kyle realized she was right. What seemed obvious to him was actually breaking thousands of years of predator behavior patterns. These younglings were being raised differently than any predator cubs in galactic history. And it was all because he had sneezed at the wrong moment. But not everyone was happy about these changes. Kyle started noticing other aliens watching the nursery from observation areas. They did not look pleased. Some appeared worried while others looked angry. One day, Thessera pulled him aside. We need to talk. The prey species have started asking questions about your program. They are concerned. Concerned about what? I am just teaching cubs to play together. You are teaching predator cubs to work as a unified group. The prey species see that as a potential threat. They want to meet with you. Kyle felt his stomach sink. He had been so focused on the younglings that he had not thought about the larger political situation. Predators and prey had a complicated relationship in the galaxy. They coexisted, but there was always tension under the surface. When do they want to meet? Tomorrow. And Lieutenant, be prepared. They are not going to be as friendly as the Predator Council was. That night, Kyle could not sleep well. He kept thinking about what the prey species might say. Would they demand he stop working with the younglings? Would they see him as a threat? He had never wanted to. Cause galactic political problems. He had just sneezed. The next morning came too quick. The meeting with prey species representatives was different from what Kyle expected. Instead of a formal council room, he found himself in a comfortable observation lounge. Large windows overlooked the station's garden areas where plants from dozens of worlds grew together in carefully controlled sections. 3 aliens waited for him, and each one represented a species that evolved as prey on their home planets. Ambassador Corella stood first. She looked like a deer that walked on 2 legs. Her fur was soft brown, and her large eyes watched Kyle with a mix of concern and curiosity. Lieutenant Harper, thank you for meeting with us on short notice. Of course, Ambassador. Kyle sat in the chair they offered. He noticed how all three representatives had positioned themselves with their backs to walls and clear views of all exits. Old prey instincts ran deep even in modern times. The second being clicked his beak nervously. Elder Tom of the Yatir people looked like a large bird designed for running rather than flying. His species came from a world where aerial predators had hunted his ancestors for millions of years. The third representative stayed seated, but her presence was strong. Captain Dessa commanded part of the Lornian defense fleet. Her species was aquatic and looked like intelligent seals with hands. She studied Kyle with the intensity of someone trained to assess threats. "We will be direct," Corella began. Her tone was polite, but Kyle could hear the tension underneath. "Your work with the predator young has not gone unnoticed. Many in the prey communities are deeply worried about what you are doing." "I am just teaching them games and cooperation," Kyle said carefully. "You are creating bonds," Elder Tom corrected sharply. "Bonds between the most dangerous young in the galaxy and a species we barely know. Bonds that cross predator species lines in ways that have never happened before." Captain Dessa leaned forward. "Lieutenant Harper, do you understand the history between prey and predator species in our galaxy? For 10,000 years we have maintained a careful balance. The predators compete mostly with each other over territory and dominance. This competition keeps them from focusing on us. But now," Corella continued, "you are teaching them unity. You are showing them how to work together and see past their species differences. Can you understand why this frightens us?" Kyle felt the weight of what they were saying. "You think I am creating a unified predator alliance. Are you not?" Tom's feathers ruffled with agitation. "Those cubs adore you. They follow your instructions without question. They are learning to view other predator species as partners instead of rivals. When they grow up and take positions of power, they will remember what you taught them." "I am teaching them music and cooperation," Kyle protested. "I am not training an army." "Intent matters less than result," Captain Dessa stated flatly. "The Predator Council sees potential for unprecedented cooperation among their species. We see the potential for prey species to become even more vulnerable than we already are." The room fell silent. Kyle looked out at the gardens below where dozens of species mixed peacefully, predators and prey walking together in the controlled safety of the diplomatic station. But that safety was built on thousands of years of careful political balance. "What do you want me to do?" Kyle asked finally. "Stop," Corella said simply. "End your program. Return to normal diplomatic duties. Let the natural patterns reassert themselves." "The natural patterns where everyone stays suspicious and separated?" "The natural patterns where prey species feel safe," Tom said firmly. "You are prey too human. Or have you forgotten? Your species may not have evolved with constant predator pressure, but you are not apex predators. You are vulnerable like us." Kyle thought about that. Humans were omnivores who used intelligence and tools to overcome physical limitations. Not quite predator, not quite prey. Something in between. "I disagree with that characterization," he said slowly. "But I understand your concerns. The thing is, those cubs are not learning to be a unified threat. They are learning to be individuals who happen to work well together despite being different." "You split hairs," Captain Dessa said. "Cooperation between predator species regardless of your intent shifts the balance of power in the galaxy." "Does it?" Kyle challenged. "Or does it create opportunities for better relationships between all species?" "The younglings do not just interact with each other. They interact with prey species caretakers, with visitors, with everyone around them. They are learning that different does not mean enemy." "That is a nice idea," Corella said, and her tone softened slightly. "But nice ideas do not change instinct. When those cubs grow up, their predator natures will resurface, and they will have a network of allies from other predator species to call upon. Or they will have friends," Kyle countered. "Friends who will make them think twice before giving in to violent instincts." "Ambassador, you are assuming the worst outcome. What if we get the best one instead? What if these cubs grow up to be leaders who actually understand how to cooperate peacefully?" Tom stood up abruptly. His agitation was clear in every movement. "This is pointless. He will not listen to reason. The predators have claimed him and he cannot see past their influence. That is not fair." Kyle started, but Corella raised her hand. "Peace, Elder Tom. Lieutenant Harper, I do not think you are blind to reality. I think you are optimistic about the future, but optimism has led to tragedy before in galactic history." She stood gracefully. "We will not force you to end your program. We do not have the authority to do that, but we will be watching very carefully. If we see any indication that your work is creating real danger for prey species, we will act to protect ourselves. Act how? Kyle asked. That depends on the level of danger we perceive. Captain Dessa stood as well. For now, we simply want you to understand the broader implications of your actions. The galaxy is bigger than one nursery, Lieutenant. The predators are not the only species with ways to defend themselves. The implied threat was clear. After the three representatives left, Kyle sat alone in the lounge for a long time. He had not expected the meeting to be easy, but the veiled warnings at the end had shaken him. He had been so focused on the younglings that he had not considered the larger political picture. His communicator buzzed. Thesara's voice came through. Lieutenant, we have a situation at the nursery. You need to return immediately. Kyle ran. His mind raced with possibilities. Had something happened to the younglings? Were they hurt? By the time he reached the nursery, a crowd had gathered outside. He pushed through to find Thesara standing between the cub enclosure and a group of protesters. Not predator species this time. These were prey species civilians holding signs. What happened? Kyle demanded. Someone leaked footage of your training sessions, Thesara said grimly. The videos were edited to show only the coordination exercises. None of the playing or cultural activities are included. The footage is spreading across the station networks and is being presented as military drilling of predator cubs. Through the observation window, Kyle could see the younglings pressed against the glass. They looked confused and scared by the noise outside. A small Havrin cub that Kyle had nicknamed Spike was trying to herd the smaller cubs away from the window. Even at his young age, protective instincts were emerging. We need to stop this, Kyle said. The younglings are frightened. I am trying, but the protesters have a legal right to peaceful assembly. We cannot remove them by force without proper cause. Kyle made a decision. He moved to the external speaker system. My name is Lieutenant Kyle Harper. I run the cultural exchange program you are protesting. If you have concerns, I will address them right here and now. The crowd noise lowered. A plenary male stepped forward looking uncertain but determined. You are teaching predators to work together, why? I am teaching cubs to play together, Kyle corrected. There is a difference. Come inside if you want. See for yourself what actually happens here. Thesara's eyes widened. Lieutenant, that is highly irregular. So is a protest outside a nursery. If they want transparency, let us give it to them. After discussion with security and the protest organizers, a small group of observers was allowed into the visitor area. Kyle brought the younglings out. They immediately formed their protective cluster around him the way they always did when uncertain. This is what you are protesting, Kyle said, gesturing to the cubs. They are children. Yes, they are predator species children, but they are still young and learning. I do teach them coordination and teamwork. I also teach them music, games, and problem solving. Watch. He knelt down and began a simple song the cubs had learned. They responded enthusiastically, joining in with their voices. The harmony was imperfect, but full of effort and joy. Several protesters' expressions softened watching the scene. Now watch this, Kyle said. He deliberately produced a small sneeze. The younglings immediately echoed it, then broke into happy chirps and laughter at their shared joke. That is the terrible threat you have been warned about, Kyle continued. Cubs who greet each other with sneezes and sing songs together. Yes, they are learning to cooperate across species lines. Is that really so bad? A Yatir female in the observation group spoke up. But when they grow up, this cooperation could be used for harmful purposes. It could also be used for scientific. The Joint Council Chamber was the largest room Kyle had ever seen on the diplomatic station. It was designed to hold representatives from every member species of the Galactic Assembly. Hundreds of beings filled the tiered seating that rose up on all sides. Kyle stood alone on the central floor, feeling very small and very human. Well, not completely alone. Thesara stood beside him. She had insisted on being there as both his advisor and as a witness to whatever would happen. Kyle was grateful for her presence, even though his hands were shaking slightly. This emergency session is now in order, announced Grand Mediator Olith. His species, the Methrin, looked like tall beings made of living crystal. They were considered neutral, having evolved without being clearly predator or prey. They often served as mediators in galactic disputes. We are gathered to address the matter of human Lieutenant Kyle Harper and his cultural exchange program with predator species younglings. Both the Predator Council and the Prey Species Alliance have brought concerns to this assembly. Commander Vrock stood first. His massive form was imposing even in this huge chamber. The Predator Council sees no issue that requires assembly intervention. Lieutenant Harper's program has been supervised, documented, and has produced measurably positive results. The younglings show improved social integration and reduced interspecies aggression. These are outcomes we desire. Ambassador Corella rose to respond. The Prey Species Alliance acknowledges these short-term benefits. However, we must raise concerns about long-term implications. Never before has cross-species predator cooperation been successfully created at such fundamental developmental stages. The potential for this to shift galactic power balances cannot be ignored. We are discussing possibilities, not facts, Vrock growled. We are punishing success based on imagined future threats. We are exercising appropriate caution, Corella replied. As prey species have learned to do over millions of years of evolution. The argument grew heated quickly. Representatives from both sides added their voices. Some spoke in support of Kyle's program, while others demanded it end immediately. Kyle stood silently watching the galaxy's leaders argue about whether his sneeze greeting games were a threat to interstellar peace. Grand Mediator. Oleth called for order several times before the chamber finally quieted. Lieutenant Harper, you have remained silent throughout this debate. The Assembly would hear your perspective on these matters. Every eye in the massive chamber turned to Kyle. He took a deep breath and remembered something his grandmother used to tell him. When you are lost, return to the beginning. I sneezed, he said simply. That is how all of this started. I had a cold, I sneezed, and some cubs thought it was interesting. Everything that happened after came from trying to understand their reaction and building on that connection. Oversimplification, Elder Tom called out from his seat. You have created something far more complex than a simple sneeze response. Have I? Kyle challenged. Or have I just been allowed to spend time with younglings without thousands of years of predator and prey politics affecting every single interaction? He looked around the chamber. Everyone here is so focused on what these cubs might become someday that you are ignoring what they actually are right now. They are children. They want to play, learn, and feel safe. The fact that they are predator species does not change those basic needs. But it does change the context, Captain Dessa argued. Even young predators are not harmless. Even in play, they practice hunting behaviors. And I respect that, Kyle said. I do not try to make them something they are not. I am not teaching wolves to eat vegetables. I am just showing them different ways to be strong. That cooperation is not weakness. That different species can find things in common despite their differences. Ambassador Corella stood again. Her expression was troubled. Lieutenant, your intentions are clearly good. But good intentions have led to disasters before in galactic history. The prey species have experienced hunting and violence from these species' ancestors for thousands of years. You are asking us to trust that your program will not make our situation worse. I am, Kyle admitted. But more than that, I am asking you to consider what happens if we do not try something new. If we keep every species locked in their traditional roles, always suspicious and always separated, then nothing ever changes. The cubs I work with are already breaking those old patterns. They are forming friendships across species lines that predator and prey young never had before. Friendships? A Lornian representative Kyle did not recognize spoke up. Lieutenant Harper, I have reviewed your documentation thoroughly. The predator cubs have formed attachment bonds with you specifically. With each other, they demonstrate alliance behaviors, not true friendship. There is an important distinction, Kyle paused. Was that true? He thought carefully about how the younglings interacted with each other, compared to how they interacted with him. Were they really friends or just convenient allies? I think you might be wrong, he said slowly. But even if you are right, even if it is just alliance behavior, is that not still better than constant competition? Is alliance not an improvement over every predator species fighting each other for dominance? Not if prey species become the external enemy that unifies the predators, Corella said sadly. Lieutenant, you are a prey species yourself even if humans do not fit the traditional definition. You provide a common reference point for the cubs, a bridge between their different species. But when you eventually leave, what happens to that bridge? It may redirect toward us. The chamber erupted in renewed arguing. Representatives shouted over each other in dozens of languages. The translators struggled to keep up with the chaos. Grand Mediator Oleth had to call for order repeatedly before silence returned. The Assembly must reach a decision, Oleth stated. Several options have been proposed. First, immediate termination of the program with Lieutenant Harper returning to standard diplomatic duties. Second, continuation of the program but under increased oversight with mandatory inclusion of prey species representatives. Third, expansion of the program to include prey species younglings, creating a mixed environment with both predator and prey cubs together. The third option is unacceptable, Vrock said immediately. Mixing predator and prey young at these developmental stages could trigger hunting instincts. It would be dangerous for everyone involved, especially the prey, younglings. Yet you claim your cubs have learned. Control, challenged a Yatir representative. Control, appropriate to their age and environment. Introducing actual prey species, even young ones, changes everything. The instincts could override the training. Kyle's mind worked quickly. He could see both perspectives and understand both sets of fears. The predators worried about their young being held back, their natural development restricted by others' fears. The prey species worried about becoming targets of an unprecedented alliance, and caught in the middle were younglings who just wanted to play. I have a fourth option, Kyle said suddenly. Every head turned toward him again. Let me work with prey species cubs too. Not in the same space, not mixing them with the predator young, but let me show them the same lessons I am teaching the predators. Music, games, cooperation. Let them see that what I teach is not about creating weapons. It is about creating understanding. Silence filled the massive chamber. Oleth tilted his crystalline head in what might have been curiosity. You propose running parallel programs? One for predators and one for prey? Exactly. If the concern is that predator unity threatens prey species, then give prey species the same tools. Teach their young unity, cooperation, and confidence, not as a response to predators but as something valuable in itself. This could work, Corella said slowly. Her large eyes were thoughtful. If both groups learn similar values independently, they might eventually be able to interact without the traditional power imbalance creating problems, or it creates two unified forces that inevitably come into conflict, Tom argued. Two organized sides rather than the current fragmented situation. Or it creates a generation that finally moves past the predator and prey divide entirely, Kyle countered. You are all assuming that biology is destiny, that these ancient patterns can never change. But if we teach all the young, regardless of whether they are predator or prey, that cooperation and understanding are possible, maybe they will build a future we cannot even imagine right now. Vrock's crystal spines rattled thoughtfully. The human makes a valid point. We are so focused on what has always been that we cannot see what might be possible. This represents a significant shift in approach, Oleth observed. It would require substantial resources, additional personnel, and carefully coordinated programming. I volunteered to coordinate the effort, Thassara said. She had been quiet until now, but her voice carried authority. I have supervised Lieutenant Harper's work from the beginning. I believe in its potential, and I believe the prey species deserve the same opportunity for their younglings that the predators have received. The debate continued for hours. Representatives argued back and forth. They proposed amendments and conditions. They negotiated details and raised concerns. Kyle stood through all of it. His feet ached and his head hurt from trying to follow dozens of simultaneous arguments through translation. Finally, as the station's artificial sun began its setting cycle, Grand Mediator Oleth called for a vote. All in favor of implementing. The prey species nursery was located on the opposite side of the station from the predator facility. Kyle walked through unfamiliar corridors with Thassara beside him. He felt more nervous now than he had on his first day with the predator cubs. Back then he had not known what to expect. Now he knew exactly how much could go wrong. The prey species younglings are different in many ways, Thassara explained as they walked. They have been raised with constant awareness of predators. Their instincts tell them to run, hide, or freeze when faced with something unknown. You cannot approach them the same way you did with the predator cubs. I understand. What do you suggest? Patience. Let them come to you. Do not make sudden movements or loud noises, and whatever you do, do not sneeze without warning them first. That last bit made Kyle smile despite his nerves. The sneeze that had started everything might actually frighten prey species younglings rather than intrigue them. He would need a completely different approach. The prey nursery was designed very differently from the predator facility. Instead of climbing structures and open spaces, it had numerous small hiding spots, quiet areas, and gentle lighting. Everything was built to make the younglings feel safe rather than challenged. About 20 young beings were present when Kyle and Thassara entered. They represented 5 different prey species. Planari that looked like small deer, Yatter resembling fluffy ground birds, Lornian that were seal-like, Brevet with large ears and nervous energy, and Tellan that appeared almost rabbit-like with 6 legs. The moment Kyle stepped into view, every single youngling froze. Their large eyes fixed on him. Several of the smallest ones immediately ran to hide. Others pressed themselves low to the ground in instinctive freeze responses. Kyle's heart sank. This was going to be much harder than he thought. He slowly sat down on the floor, making himself as small and unthreatening as possible. "Hello, everyone. My name is Kyle. I am here to be your friend." None of the younglings moved. They watched him with the kind of wary attention that came from generations of ancestors who had survived by being careful. "I know I look strange to you," Kyle continued, speaking softly. "I am from a planet called Earth. We did not have many large predators where my people come from. We learned to work together to stay safe and find food. I want to teach you some of the things humans do for fun." Still no response. Kyle looked at Thessera for guidance. She made a small gesture that seemed to mean keep trying. Kyle thought for a moment, then began humming. It was the same simple melody he had taught the predator cubs. The prey youngling's ears twitched at the sound. A few heads tilted in curiosity. He hummed the tune again, then stopped. One small Tellan youngling took a tentative hop closer. Its nose twitched as it studied him. Kyle remained perfectly still, letting the cub make all the choices. The Tellan hopped closer again. It was now within arm's reach. Kyle very slowly extended his hand palm up in a non-threatening gesture. The youngling sniffed his hand carefully, then made a soft chirping sound. "That is right," Kyle said gently. "I am safe, I promise." The Tellan chirped again, and another youngling ventured out from hiding. This one was a Planari with soft brown spots on its fur. It approached on shaky legs, watching Kyle's every movement. Over the next hour, Kyle sat motionless on the floor. He hummed occasionally, spoke softly, and let the younglings approach at their own pace. It was exhausting in a completely different way from working with the predator cubs. Instead of managing energy and excitement, he was trying to build trust from nothing. By the end of the first session, about half the younglings had approached him. A few had even touched his hand or clothes. The Tellan that came first had gained enough confidence to climb partially into Kyle's lap before hopping away again. It was progress, but it felt painfully slow. "That went better than I expected," Thessera said after the younglings were taken to their rest area. "Prey species young normally take days or weeks to approach an unknown being. You had half of them investigating you within an hour." "It did not feel successful," Kyle admitted. "With the predator cubs, we were playing and singing by the end of the first day. Different species require different approaches. You are learning that lesson now." Thessera made notes on her datapad. "Tomorrow will be easier. They know you now. The fear response will be less intense." She was right. Over the next week, the prey younglings grew more comfortable with Kyle's presence. They began to play near him, though not yet with him. They listened when he hummed, and some even tried to copy the simple melodies. But there was still a barrier of fear that Kyle could not quite break through. The breakthrough came on the 8th day. Kyle was sitting in his usual spot on the floor, humming and watching the younglings play. The Tellan that had approached him first was now bold enough to hop around him in circles. The other cubs were chasing each other in a game that looked like tag. Then Kyle felt it. That familiar tickle in his nose. His cold had come back slightly. Without thinking, he turned his head away from the younglings and sneezed as quietly as he could. "Shoo!" Instantly, every youngling froze. Kyle held his breath, waiting for them to panic and run. Instead, something unexpected happened. The brave Tellan hopped right up to Kyle's face. It studied him intently. Then, in a tiny voice that the translator barely picked up, it made a sound. "Achoo?" Kyle was shocked into stillness. The prey younglings had the same reaction as the predator cubs. Before he could process what was happening, another youngling made the sound. "Achoo," then another. Within minutes, all the prey younglings were carefully making sneeze sounds at each other. But unlike the predator cubs, who had treated it like an exciting battle cry, the prey younglings treated it like a gentle greeting. They would approach each other, say "achoo" softly, then nuzzle or touch noses. "Remarkable," Thessera breathed from her observation spot. They have interpreted the same sound completely differently. For the predators, it was a challenge or victory cry. For the prey, it is a friendly greeting, a way of saying "I mean no harm." Kyle watched in amazement as the prey younglings who had been so afraid of him began approaching one by one. Each would softly say, "Achoo," then touch his hand or leg gently before hopping away. It was their way of accepting him into their group. The Talon climbed fully into Kyle's lap this time and stayed there. It looked up at him and sneezed very softly. Kyle sneezed back just as gently. The youngling made a happy chirping sound and settled down comfortably. "You did it," Thesara said with clear approval in her voice. "You found the bridge. The same sound works for both groups, but in ways that match their nature. The predators see strength. The prey see gentleness. Both are correct." From that day forward, the prey species program progressed much faster. The younglings learned the same games and songs Kyle had taught the predator cubs. But they approached everything more carefully and cooperatively. Where predator cubs would compete to climb highest, prey cubs would help each other reach safe spots. Where predators would hunt in their games, prey would practice escape routes and warning calls. Kyle found himself learning as much as he was teaching. The prey younglings showed him that strength came in many forms. Their caution was not weakness but wisdom. Their cooperation was not submission, but survival strategy refined over millions of years. Several weeks into the dual programs, Kyle noticed something interesting. The younglings from both nurseries were starting to ask about each other. The predator cubs wanted to know about the other friends Kyle mentioned. The prey cubs were curious about the different younglings they heard about. "They want to meet," Kyle told Thesara one evening after both sessions. "Is that even possible?" The council explicitly forbade mixing the two groups. "The risk is considered too high. What if we did it very carefully? Start with visual contact through barriers. Let them see each other but not interact directly. If that goes well, maybe we could try supervised meetings with the oldest, most mature younglings from each group." Thesara was quiet for a long moment. "You are proposing something that has never been attempted in recorded galactic history, bringing predator and prey young together deliberately. I know. But Thesara, they are all asking for it. Not because we told them to, but because they are curious. They hear about each other and want to meet. Is that not exactly what we hoped for? Natural interest in others who are different? It is. But if something goes wrong, if any youngling is hurt, the entire program will be terminated. Both nurseries will be shut down. You understand that risk? I do. But I think the potential benefit is worth it." After days of discussion and planning, the council finally approved a carefully controlled first meeting. It would be brief, fully supervised, and could be stopped instantly if any problems arose. Kyle, Thesara, and a team of caretakers prepared both groups of younglings. "You are going to meet some different friends today," Kyle told the predator cubs. "They are smaller than you and they may seem scared. You must be very gentle and move slowly. Can you do that?" Spike and the other predator younglings nodded seriously. They had learned to trust Kyle's instructions over the months of working together. In the prey nursery, Kyle gave a different message. "You are going to meet some friends who are very different.